Right, let's go for the geography past paper for 2023. I haven't seen a lot of these in YouTube videos, so yeah, figured I'll make one, because why not? Alright, first question. It says, for 1A, it says, identify which region of the UK is only made up of sedimentary rocks. Now, these early questions are just only pure knowledge, but the marking only rewards accuracy only, so there's no really exclamation. But if you're unsure, you can go through every single one of them and eliminate, obviously, what wrong question options and choose the most logical one. In this case, the answer is A. So, next one. Explain one way in which the rock is weathered. Here the map team want to specific indicators, things like literacy rate, life expectancy, GDP per capita. To get the mark, you must name a valid indicator, state what it measures, keep it concise. For example, you could say a correct answer here. So you could say that simply identifying a development indicator and describing what it shows about the quality of life. For example, you could say for frost weathering takes place when liquid water enters rock and, or you could say fills joint and fissures. So that's one mark. And then you could also say it then freezes and expands, so fracturing the rock. And that's 4 marks. You get 1 mark for saying that it entered the rock and filled the joint out of fissures. That's 1 mark. And then you also explain it. So it then freezes and expands to fracturing the rock. This is an example of what the mark you actually expect in this case. Next one. Now this is about what marks in the first place. The marks you want to develop point, not just naming causes. So we could use the structure point, explain, and then L to D. Now P equals to point, then you explain, right? And then L to D just means link to development. So in this case, this question is asking explain one impact of glaciation on UK's landscape. You could just say a quick one, just say glacial erosion has created cirques and eroded them with abrasion or blocking processes. Now, you get 1 mark for saying glacial erosion has been processes. That's your point. Now you have to explain it. Now you have to say, and eroded them with abrasion or plucking process. That's another mark. You just follow the structure which you followed here. Point, explain, and link to development. And that's how you get the most marks. Next question. here it says, explain one reason why rocks with many joints and faults are eroded rapidly by waves. Now, in this case, the question's only asking for one reason. Don't explain more than one reason. That is just absolutely pointless and waste of time in this case. So, for the example answer, you could just say a quick one for explain. You could say water and air poured into these joints and fault. So that's one mark, that's your point. Then you have to say where they are compressed and this pressure can fracture rocks. So you get one mark for saying water have forced into the joints and faults. That's one mark. And then you could say where they are compressed under pressure can fracture the rock. That's another mark. 4 easy answer. Now the next question. You said explain one benefit of using soft engineering to use coastal arrangement. In this case, some people may have gone to Minehead. You would have explored more about this. In this case, you would be awarded 1 mark for explaining the benefit, and another further mark for perhaps more detail of that benefit. Because as it says, explained. Using the structure we talked about before, we could say that it is relatively cheap compared to hard engineering. Now, you got 1 mark for saying it is relatively cheap. That's one. And then explain it. So say compared to hard engineering. That's another mark. Full answer. You explain what would the benefit and how could this make an impact. And like what your comparison is. You can always compare or explain what that does. It's completely up to you, but however, I prefer to just compare them, easier for me. Now, this is where some people lost more marks in 2023. So you get 1 mark for where the question said first. For a named UK coastal landscape, explain 2 ways in which human activity is causing change. Name coastal landscape. So we could say perhaps a trip you went from geography. For me, I went on to Minehead. So we could say Minehead. Now this is a 4 marker question, but it just says explain 2 ways. So reason why there's 2 paragraphs in the first place. Now we could say that there are development of tourism which leads to major changes in coastal landscape. Now this with the help is that you explain what it is. The development of tourism. Yep, that's your point. Then you're gonna explain it, which leads to major changes in coastal landscape. But the examiner wants to know how. How did this create major changes in landscape? And that's where most people lost marks. In this case, we have to say that with buildings of docks and major facilities. Wait, sorry. Delete major, sorry about that. But other facilities. So, you get 1 mark for saying the point, which is development of tourism, 1 mark, which leads to the major change in the coastal landscape. We also explain how, so it said, with building a dock and other facility. That's a landmark. You get 2 marks for each one. The second point, you'd say, population growth, in coastal areas. For example, we could put a full stop here. For example, retirement areas. Retirement areas that leads to growth in housing close to coast. And you get 1 mark for saying population growth in coastal areas. You also provide an example too. You don't always have to provide an example. This is what I just put to make it easier for you guys, give you more context. But I put, as long as this, I also put, which leads to growth in housing close to coast. This will attract more people, obviously, but either way, you will get 1 mark for saying this too. So in this case, that is 4 marks. Alright, let's flip back to the next page. So, sorry about that. This is about 3A. Now, 3A just says, study figure 1, which is a photograph of a river landscape in Western England. This is the picture. It says, identify which is the best evidence that this river is in the flood. Now, looking at here, we could just say, obviously, that some trees are partially underwater. You could just go through all of them with using the figure, but I find it pointless, to be honest, because it's really obvious what I've been. But if you want to go through them, that is completely up to you. Now, next one is that state 1 piece of evidence that this river has large sedimental loads. Now, we could just say, because the water is brown. Because obviously in here, it doesn't really show anything else. Just your water is brown, there's like lots of trees in the area. Doesn't show much in the sky, just clear sky really. But in the case, to get the easy 1 mark, you can just say because the water is brown. And that's how you got the 1 mark. Next question. Now this is also another hard one, but it also says, explain 1 cost and 1 benefit of using hard engineering to manage river flood risk. Now you got 2 points. You have to talk about cost. You have to talk about the benefits. Now the mark team will only award 1 mark for basic explanation of a cost or benefit, with 1 further mark for detail and development of that cost or benefit. Now, for cost, you could just say an easy 2 marker. You could just say hard engineering is very expensive. Both to build and to maintain. Now you got 1 mark for saying hard engineering is very expensive. You explained your point. You got to explain it too. To build and to maintain. That is already explained So you get your 2 marks, full 2 marks here. Now, for your benefits, you could just say that you could just talk about hard engineering again. It doesn't matter, completely up to you if you want to talk about something else, but I would say hard engineering can protect property saving very large sums of money. Oh, no. So we could just say hard engineering can protect property. That is your 1 mark, you explain your point. Then you have to say saving very large sums of money. That is your 40 mark, and that's how you get your 4 mark you need to get for question 4. We're still on section A, by the way. So, for question 4, this is full 8 marker to talk about. So, please note that you are not asked to explicitly differentiate between human and physical reason. This is why most people lost most of the marks in AO3 or AO4, because the marks did not ask to differentiate between human and physical reason. So if we read the question here, it said analyze figure 2A and figure 2B, which have the information about major flood events in England and Wales between 1920 and 2019. Now, according to the figure, this is the figure, and along with this one, this is a big table. Basically just for the answer here, but it says figure 2B, figure 2A shows the number of major flood events in each 20-year period since 1920. This is your bar chart. This is basically what it shows. And then it says figure 2B provides information about the 5 largest events as measured by the number of properties flooded and the number of deaths. This is what they're asking about and how it can provide information about the 5 largest flood events. Both of these information provide you the answer straight away, getting you started on your 8 marker. Now, for your 8 marker, it says assess the physical and human reasons for the changes in flood events in the past 100 years. It says you must use evidence from 2A and 2B in your answer. In this case, we can talk about AO4, but that is an answer. However, to get your 4 mark, you must show an understanding to deconstruct information and to also provide a connection between concepts throughout these 2 tables and to show a well-developed argument that can understand, which shows your understanding, also showing the evidence throughout. You also got to use geography skills to obtain accurate information that support all of the aspects of the argument. In this case, for AO3, now the 4 mark I am going to write will be structured to help me to drop band criteria for AO3 and AO4, but I'll also be leaving the marks in on the figures that they have provided me for the examples. So let's start off with flood events in the UK have significantly changed over the past 100 years. Sorry about that. Now this can be due to both physical and human factors. Now this is the introduction we just talked about here. Now we could then continue by saying one key physical reason is climate change. Now we also explain by saying which has led to rising sea levels and more frequent and intense storms. And then we could say this increases both coastal and river flooding. After that, I am going to provide an example using the table they have provided us. I'm going to be saying, for example, the 1953 flood was caused by a storm surge and tides. And then using figure 2a, we could say that this had led to 307 deaths, which is the highest in the data. I'll just say figure 2a, so when you read this you won't be confused on like what table am I using, what figure am I not using. Now we should now start out with our explaining, because though it does so, it's just the physical change at the top says, we could just explain what this describes about this. So we could just start off with saying, however, human factors have played a significant role and then you also got to explain the point, so you should just start off with saying population growth in especially in southeast England and then we could say means more for now live near rivers and coast. And then you've got to explain what did this increase, what did it do. So we could just start off with saying that which increases the number of properties at risk. And that your first point for your AO3 and AO2 combined. Okay? Now we can demonstrate the 2007 flood using the data. We could say the 2007 flood, which has affected 55,000 properties, shows how urban expansion, of course gotta talk about urban expansion as you learn in your GCSE spec, has made floods more damaging, even if death tolls are lower. Now that's how you state on you gotta state how this can be partially due to what. So we could start saying this is partly due to improved forecasting and emergency response. And then we say reducing fatalities despite the frequent events. Now we have explained our AO2, not AO3, AO4. Now we've got to start out with our conclusion. Now, turning on the next page, if you have some page left over, please feel free to write on them. But I'm just gonna flip over to the next page because I don't have any more space, right? My writing is way too big. Now, we can then state our conclusion by saying figure 2A shows a major, well, we could just say a sharp rise in major flood events in the 21st century, in this case is around 17 out of 24 occurred between 2000 and 2019. Now we have to say this suggests what. So then we can start by saying this suggests that both change in human and climate change have made floods more impactful and common. And that's how you get your 4-mark answer. Look back on our last page. You get 2 marks for stating out AO3, 4 marks for stating out AO4, and then an extra 2 marks by saying what you believe in, your conclusion overall. So you get 2 marks for saying that. And that's how you can get your 4-mark answer.